Research breakthrough, fresh hope for malaria vaccine by 2015. Diplomatic row, Libya summons U.S. ambassador over anti-terror raid.
If they fight the ICC, vote against the ICC, withdraw their cases, it will be a badge of shame for each and every one of them and for their countries if they do that.
And which way Africa? Kofi Annan weighs in on simmering row between African leaders and the International Criminal Court. It's 8 p.m. in East Africa. This is Africa Live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Penina Kariba with plenty coming up this hour, including these stories. Zambia mines divestiture. Africa's largest copper producer plans a comprehensive sell-off of mining assets. And Ethiopia hosts African champions Nigeria in a World Cup qualifier this weekend. And the Bafana coach believes the Walia Antelopes can spring a surprise. We'll begin this bulletin with what is being considered as very good news. The first vaccine against malaria could be available by 2015. That's emerged at a malaria conference in South Africa. The vaccine has been tested on thousands of African children. It almost halved the number of cases and provided protection for up to 18 months. Developer GlaxoSmithKline is to seek regulatory approval for the vaccine next year. CCTV's Renee Delcam has more.
The RTSS vaccine is the most clinically advanced malaria vaccination and was tested in Africa's largest ever malaria trial, involving more than 15,000 African children in Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Ghana, Mozambique, Burkina Faso and Gabon. Experts say medical trials conducted since 2009 found that the vaccine reduced disease in thousands of babies and young children. If it's approved by regulatory bodies, it will be a major breakthrough in treating malaria, a disease which claims hundreds of thousands of lives across the globe every year.
If it's successful, this would be the first malaria, and not only malaria, but the first vaccine against parasites. We do not have any vaccine against parasites at the moment. There's never been one.
Dr. Lucas Otieno says the vaccine is an important tool in the fight against malaria.
Vaccines are some of the greatest public health tools that we have. For instance, if you take smallpox was eradicated because of vaccination. We know that polio cases have come down significantly because of vaccines. The same thing with measles and many other diseases. And therefore, we think that a malaria vaccine, if successful, would be a great tool to add to what's already out there.
The World Health Organization is expected to make recommendations about the use of the vaccine to governments around the world by 2015. Experts like Professor Nick White, who's been a malaria scholar for over 30 years, are cautiously optimistic.
It's been a long and very painful road towards the malaria vaccine, and we have definitely not got to the end of that road. This is the first vaccine of any parasite in human beings. So it's a great scientific advance, and we should be thankful to that. But it's not a particularly powerful vaccine. The degree of protection it provides is not great, and we don't know yet whether it would be cost effective, in other words, worth it, to deploy this at scale.
Although there's plenty of excitement here about the RTSS vaccine, there's still a long road ahead before it becomes a reality. Meanwhile, there's plenty of hard work to be done on improving the current malaria prevention and treatment tools, such as new drug development and insecticides. Renee Delcam, CCTV, Durban, South Africa.
Now, malaria is a deadly mosquito-borne disease that affects millions each year in Africa and around the world. According to the World Health Organization, there are an estimated over 200 million cases of malaria reported each year globally, resulting in over 500,000 deaths. Around 90% of these deaths occur here in Africa, mostly in young children below the age of 5. 90% of all African malaria cases occur in sub-Saharan Africa. According to Roll Back Malaria, a global partnership initiated by the World Health Organization and the United Nations, malaria has been estimated to cost Africa more than $12 billion every year in lost GDP, even though it could be controlled for a fraction of that sum. While some countries in Africa are already making gains in controlling the effects of this deadly disease, Zimbabwe is one of them.
Zimbabwe is one of the success stories in Africa's fight against malaria.
We used to record about around 3,000 deaths and around 2 to 3 million cases in a year. But for the past 3 or so years, we have been recording around 350 deaths in a year.
This is due to sustained preventive measures, such as household spraying and the distribution of treated mosquito nets, all free in the most malaria-prone areas. Within 7 years, officials hope to eradicate new infections within Zimbabwe, but they remain alert.
In our country, 70% of the population is rural. And of the population, which is about 12 million, about 50% of that population is at risk of contracting malaria.
Expectant mothers and children under the age of 5 are the most vulnerable. The country is stepping up the fight by switching focus from control to pre-elimination. Matabeleland South, a province that borders Botswana and South Africa, is the pilot region for this new approach.
The difference between pre-elimination and control is that in control, you get patients coming to the health facility, they are treated, they go back home, and you wait for patients to come. But in pre-elimination, when you see a case which comes to the health facility, that case is supposed to be followed to the village.
The entire village is then screened and treated where necessary. Cases that come in from outside Zimbabwe are reported to the country of origin so that similar action can be taken there too. This is part of a cross-border program that targets vulnerable border towns. The cross-border malaria program is part of a broader regional initiative where countries in SADC are aiming to completely eliminate malaria by the year 2020. Ahead of that, though, Zimbabwe is aiming to reduce the 300 or so annual malaria deaths to near zero within the next 2 years. Zimbabwe is well ahead of schedule. Officials here are confident that within the next 2 years, no more Zimbabweans will die from malaria. Farai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
For more details on the world's first malaria vaccine, we're now joined here in studio by Dr. Barnabas Bombok, chairman of the private sector Rollback Malaria East Africa Network and country head, Nigeria Vector Public Health, a Swiss company dealing with malaria and other disease control solutions, including mosquito nets. Dr. Bombok, thank you for joining us tonight. So this is obviously great news. What does it signify in the fight against malaria?
Well, I think, as you rightfully put, this is a very, very important step in the fight against malaria to add on to the other existing solutions. I think we should not ignore the fact that we have other interventions that have brought us this far in malaria control. So, yes, it's a milestone that we need to explore as we move forward.
But how soon will this vaccine be available to the masses?
Well, from research and data available, and as you are aware, the organization that has been doing this research, GlaxoSmithKline, is currently proposing that this vaccine needs to go to the next step, which is normally the most important step in vaccine development, and that is the assessment on safety and the enhancement of efficacy. And after that, we will then be able to know the next steps that will make this available to be used in public health.
And I guess then the next big question is, will it be affordable to the masses that are usually attacked by malaria?
Well, there is nothing that is more costly than death. And when we look back, we know that all the other interventions, when they came into the market, have never been affordable. But we know that concerted efforts by many stakeholders, majorly the donors, the donor community, the endemic countries, putting in a lot of efforts through their malaria control programs, will develop a synergistic approach to be able to ensure that this vaccine does not only just become accessible in terms of reach, but also in terms of cost. However, it's not possible at this point in time to really ascertain what exactly will be the actual cost in dollar that each and every individual that will be a beneficiary will access this vaccine.
Right. So you talked obviously about the other interventions, and you said let's also not ignore those interventions.
Yes.
And I think the most commonly used, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is the treated mosquito nets, the use of mosquito nets. So now with this vaccine, how does this change the dynamics of the campaign against malaria?
I think I want to echo the call by Rollback Malaria. In the beginning of the discussion, you put it very, very clearly that a lot of progress has been made. This wouldn't have been possible without the interventions. You just mentioned mosquito nets. We know that we also have indoor residual spray. We also know that there has been a lot of effort in terms of education in behavior change. We know that there has been existing a lot of scaling up diagnosis, which is a major and the most important step in effective treatment. So all these have actually been the cornerstones of the achievements we've made. I would like to really put it very clearly that vaccines that have been used before have shown that they have a very, very strong and high efficacy of up to 80% for you to have realistic gains and maybe drop other interventions. However, what we read from the current results is we are talking about 45% for the current malaria vaccine. Well, 45% is not bad enough for a bad disease like malaria.
But it's not good enough either.
But on the other hand, we know that mosquito nets in the research that's available in 2005 indicate that when you scale up mosquito net distribution to at least 80% coverage, you have 50% reduction in disease prevalence. The vaccine is just giving you 45. So I would urge everyone and every country in Africa to ensure that they maintain the current interventions until really the scientific world have clear evidence that this vaccine can give us the results we desire.
So in short, it's still early days to
It's still
celebrate.
early days to be excited. However, it's a good step in the right direction.
All right, let's leave it there for now. Thanks very much. Dr. Barnabas Bombok, Chairman, Private Sector Rollback Malaria East Africa Network, and Country Head, Nigeria Vector Public Health, a Swiss company dealing with malaria and other disease control solutions, including mosquito nets. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a break now. Coming up, diplomatic crowd, Libya summons U.S. ambassador over anti-terror raid. And troubled North insurgents strike again in northern Mali town. Developing story in Libya now, which has summoned the U.S. ambassador to the country for questioning on Monday over the weekend anti-terror strike that saw the capture of a suspected al-Qaeda leader on Libyan territory. Anas al-Libi, a suspect in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, was seized in the capital Tripoli on Saturday. According to a statement released, Libya's Minister of Justice wanted a number of explanations concerning the case. The U.S. has said Libya was a legal and an appropriate target. Liby's son, Abdullah al-Rukai, has said his father was seized by masked gunmen early on Saturday morning and that some of them were Libyans. He believes the Libyan government was implicated in his father's disappearance, a claim Tripoli denies. Meanwhile, around 150 protesters gathered in Benghazi, Libya on Monday, setting ablaze U.S. flags and shouting slogans condemning Libya's capture.
The reason why we are here is because of the puppet government and the failure of the Congress, who used our Libyan brothers to arrest Abu Anas al-Libi. So it's a failed government. If they won't release our brother Abu Anas soon, we will come out to protest again. We will make more demands and will act in ways that will displease Prime Minister Ali Zaidan and his government.
The case of the kidnapping of our brother Abu Anas al-Libi from Tripoli is a gesture towards the Americans and crusaders against Libya. We will not remain silent about this. We will go out in peaceful protests. A case like this will not pass easily in Libya.
Well, let's discuss this issue further. We are joined live from Cairo by Ahmed Sami of the International Affairs Department, the Ahram paper, and CCTV's Daniel Renches is joining us live from Washington. Thank you both for joining us. Ahmed, let me begin with you. Why has Anas al-Libi's capture become such a big deal in Libya?
Yes, the big problem that the Libyan people has waked up Saturday morning. They found the American army in their territories. So they thought that it threatened their national sovereignty, and there is a big debate in Libya right now of whether the Libyan government knew about this military act or not, because as far as we know that the Secretary of State, the U.S. Secretary of State, announced that there is some negotiations between Libya and the U.S. about the things that happened in Libya, but he denies that they told the Libyan government before this act. So the people now they don't convinced. They don't convince that they didn't convince that their government is saying the truth. So that's why they demonstrated in the streets.
All right, Daniel, let me come to you there in Washington. Obviously, Ahmed says Libyans are not convinced the government was kept out of the loop by the U.S. while executing this mission. But the U.S. insisting, Libyan government insisting rather, that it was out of the loop completely. So what's Washington's explanation for excluding the Libyan government?
Well, they haven't either denied or confirmed that the Libyan government knew about this. They're obviously keeping their cards close to their chest, understanding, I'm sure, that this is such a highly sensitive issue for the Libyan government. But as you were saying, the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, has described these actions as legal and appropriate. Now, they haven't gone into the legal definition of why they think it was legal and appropriate. But one must presume that they are defining this individual as an enemy combatant. They brought in a law after the 2001 terrorist attacks, which enabled the US to go after people that it wasn't, formally at war with an individual country, but defined the state of war much more broadly, and therefore they are treating probably this individual as an enemy combatant and therefore are questioning him. But that does leave open the question about the extent to which the Libyans knew or knew nothing about the raid. They've also more recently made a legal justification for the Osama bin Laden raid in the case where a country is deemed too weak or ineffective to go after people who have become enemies of the United States. Then they deem it legally justified to go in some manner to take this person out. Now, the problem for that argument is not from the US side, but from the side of the country in which they go in. Clearly in Pakistan, clearly in Libya, there is a very strong legal argument for saying, in their terms, this was a legal action. But in the US terms, they will continue to say that this is legal and justified.
So, Ahmed, coming back to you in Cairo, obviously the US insisting that al-Libi is a terrorist. Is the position taken by the Libyan government and the protests we're seeing in Benghazi an indication of widespread support for al-Libi and the kind of fundamentalism that yields itself to terrorism, or just Libyans seeking to protect their country's sovereignty?
Yes, I believe that the Libyan people protested in the street as they are defending their sovereignty, and they have doubt that the America is threatening their national security, because as far as we know, this they need to arrest Liby since maybe more than 1.5 decades. So the problem here that why are they still want to catch this man, and on another hand they leave the terrorism in everywhere all over the world. The people in Egypt wonder why the Americans do that in Libya. They said that it's a double standard policy, and they not even condemned what was happening in Egypt. We found in Egypt terrorist attacks everywhere in Sinai, even near Cairo, even inside of Cairo, and there is no reaction or even condemning these acts from the US government.
Right, so Daniel, coming back to you, you obviously drew parallels with the situation in Pakistan when obviously the US killed Osama bin Laden. This appears to echo that incident, obviously. So do we anticipate a similar deterioration of relations between Libya and the US?
Well, this was clearly a decision made by President Obama, and when he makes decisions like this, he has to weigh up a lot of different factors: the political factors, the risk to the US forces undertaking it, and also the diplomatic factors. Clearly there are diplomatic risks that are now being demonstrated by the actions that were taken. And so the administration has clearly said, well, we're willing to take some damage in the US-Libya relationship because we believe this is a high-profile individual and somebody who's carried out some significant terrorist attacks in the past, and therefore we think that the actions that we've taken justify what we've done in terms of the risks to the diplomatic relations. And the Libyan Prime Minister has said, indeed, that he doesn't think that long-term this will affect the US-Libya relationship. And I think the Americans are minded to think that there are still some significant domestic political issues that create vulnerabilities for the United States, and indeed they've brought in more Marines into Italy to be prepared to go in if there is a threat to the US interests there. So I don't think they think this is a perfect situation by any means, and they don't think that the US is going to be seen in a good light by Libyans, by the average Libyans. But they do obviously think they've weighed up their risks and rewards in bringing this person into US custody, and think probably also that they're going to get some intelligence value out of him.
All right, Daniel Branches, they're live for us in Washington and in Cairo. Ahmed Sami, thank you both for joining us. Now, suspected Islamist militants have blown up a bridge in the city of Bentir barely a day after they hit the northern Malian city of Gao with artillery fire. The bridge was the only route allowing travel from Gao to neighboring Niger. Gao was the first city freed from Islamist occupation by a French-led military intervention in January. Gao bore the brunt of the guerrilla war waged by survivors of the insurgency that was defeated following the January military offensive. Until Monday's incident, the area had not seen an attack since May. Mali's new president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, was elected in August, having promised to make security a top priority. The country continues to battle the remaining Islamist militant groups, which occupied the north of the country for over 9 months. Various security concerns across Africa topped the agenda at the 7th consultative meeting between the AU Peace and Security Council and UN Security Council officials that was held in Addis Ababa on Tuesday. Security officials at the meeting discussed the situation in the Great Lakes region caused by the fighting between M23 rebels and the government troops, and also the instability between Sudan and South Sudan. And the areas identified as conflict areas that needed urgent help were the Central African Republic and the Sahel region, where instability is rife. AU Commission Chairperson Lamini Zuma insisted that there was a growing need to curb terrorism across the continent. She also called for strengthening of the relations between the two councils.
Whilst progress made is undeniable, Africa continues nonetheless to grapple with serious peace and security challenges. These range from interstate conflicts, some of which have so far defied all attempts of peacemaking, to internal crises, many of which are linked to governance problems, to organized crime and terrorism.
It's important that both organizations further strengthen cooperation and develop effective partnership, including through an exchange of views on issues of interest to both the UN Security Council and AU Peace and Security Council, in accordance with the Security Council Resolutions 2033. Greater focus on the area of conflict prevention has acquired additional significance, and it is also critical that we further strengthen our joint efforts to prevent conflicts before they occur.
We are currently taking significant steps to bring this shared vision into reality, a vision which I believe reflects the natural and inevitable evolution of our long-standing relationship. The challenges the continent faces in the areas of peace and security are a shared responsibility, both African and global, and neither organization can any longer afford to confront them alone.
Well, let's take another break here on Africa Live, straight ahead.
If they fight the ICC, vote against the ICC, withdraw their cases, it will be a badge of shame for each and every one of them and for their countries if they do that.
Which way, Africa? Kofi Annan weighs in on simmering row between African leaders and the International Criminal Court. Welcome back. Former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said on Monday that it would be a badge of shame for Africa if its leaders voted to leave the International Criminal Court. Speaking in Cape Town, Annan cautioned on a vote against the tribunal without an alternative. Annan defended the court against claims by African leaders that the Hague-based court was targeting the continent and accused them of protectionism. Amid growing opposition to the ICC, the African Union is set to debate the continent's relationship with the world's first permanent court to try genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity at a special summit on Friday and Saturday. The AU has called for the ICC to drop the crimes against humanity trials of the leaders in Kenya, while lawmakers have voted to withdraw from the 10-year-old court.
If they fight the ICC, vote against the ICC, withdraw their cases, it will be a badge of shame for each and every one of them and for their countries if they do that. I am therefore concerned by recent efforts to portray the court as targeting Africa. I know this is not the case. In 4 of the cases on Africa before the court, African leaders themselves made the referral to the ICC.
To the Lampedusa disaster now, which has thrown the spotlight on the plight of African migrants. Every year, thousands risk their lives trying to get into Europe. But even if they make it, many face a life of exploitation. The International Organization for Migration has been running a campaign in Senegal to encourage people to stay home. CCTV's Desiree Cannon has more.
The last time retired machinist Ali Kouri Diop saw his son was 7 years ago.
He woke me up at dawn and said, "Daddy, I'm going to Spain to try my luck like many of my friends." I said, "Okay." I blessed him, confided him to God, and he left. But if I had to redo it today, I would not let my son embark on this adventure.
The 28-year-old shared Diop's plan was to row with his friend in a canoe to Spain. No one knows what really happened, but no one expects Cher to come home. Many families here in Dakar have similar stories to tell. Latest figures show 2/3 of migrants into Europe come from just a handful of African countries. Senegal is among them. The International Organization for Migration is trying to stem the flow of migrants by educating people in Dakar about the dangers of the journey and the life they face in Europe.
We urge the young people not to move to Europe by proposing them alternative solutions and by giving them reassurance that they can find a job in their own countries. They often spend a lot of money to go to Europe, but with more support and training, they could invest that money and succeed in their countries.
Many families here consider poverty as a decisive factor in encouraging illegal migration. But those who stayed behind can pay a terrible price. Cher Diop left a wife and 4 children.
There has been no news of him since that date. My 4 children and I do not know what to do.
And it's unlikely they'll ever find out what became of their father. Desiree Cannon, CCTV, Dakar, Senegal.
Right, let's now turn our attention to Biz News. Ramai's here with the latest.
Thank you very much, Penina. Here's what's coming up on Biz Africa tonight.